Okay, so we are up to Avak Lashon, and before we read what Avak Lashon is, I want to quote what the Rambam quoted in his Pirush on Avos, which he quotes again at the end of Isory Biya. So this is in Isory Biya 22:19. V'amru chachamim gezel va'arayos nafsho shel adam misavelhen u'machamadatan. So robbery, which I assume when he says robbery here, I don't think he means davka gezel to the exclusion of geneva. I think he means like stealing. Okay. Gezel and arayos, the soul of a person desires them and covets them. You will not find any congregation at any time in which there are not people who are licentious in arayos and in prohibited biya. What does this footnote say? The defus nosaf besugarin ve'od. Okay, so in the defusim they add the word ba'od. Okay, fine. Amru chachamim, so the chachamim say rov begezel umiut barayos v'hakol ba'avak lashon hara. The majority of people are guilty of gezel, and that's another reason why I think it cannot mean robbery. The majority of people are not guilty of armed robbery, but if it means the majority of people are guilty for some form of geneva, then that makes sense. A mute is guilty of arayos, and everyone is guilty of avak lashon hara. And the Rambam had said in I just want to hold and quote this here in the thing that the Yad Peshutah cited here. The Rambam says in Avos, hold on just a second. Oops, right there. He says, so that was from a statement above Basra, and then the Rambam says, Halavai lo yehi lashon hara atmo. So if this is true of Avak lashon hara, like if only it were the case that a person would be saved from regular lashon hara every day. Yeah, what do you say?
Does gezel mean armed robbery or robbery in broad daylight?
Well, robbery in broad daylight, but I still don't think that the row of people are doing gezel in broad daylight. Yeah.
I can easily see a lot of expensive. As in, let's say if I violate the Yeshua rules, which I follow you sometimes, then therefore that means that anything I use from them is violating the Tanayim that I'm allowed to be here, which turn
I don't know.
Places to gezel.
No, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know the parameters of gezel well enough to say what could be included or not included. Okay, so I just wanted to bring this in because he's saying that we're all guilty of this Avak Lashon hara. So now let's read what we're all guilty of every day. Okay, so he says, so we're going to read the two halachos today. Probably not get a chance to analyze it that much. V'yisham devarim, so this is back in Deios Zayin Dalet. V'yisham devarim shehin Avak Lashon hara. So the things that are the dust of Lashon hara, which I want to see. I've never seen an explanation for why it's called the dust of Lashon hara. Okay, like usually Chazal have other terms for like secondary forms of things like that. Okay, so mi yomar, so ketat, how so? Mi yomar leploni shi'e kmo shuata. So I would translate that as, who would have said that so and so would be like he is now? Okay. So you're saying something good about him, but you're acknowledging that there was something lower about him before. Shiomar, or you say, Shaskumi ploni, don't talk about so-and-so. Ini rotelodia ma'ira umahaya. I don't want to tell you what happened. Okay. So and things like that. So that, my understanding of that is like, it's indirect lashon hara, because the actual words you're saying are not degrading, but you are, through the words you are saying, pointing to some degrading thing. You're alluding to some degradation. And in some ways, in some ways it's worse, because since you're not saying the specific thing, then you're like alluding to a bunch of stuff and people's imaginations can go wild, Okay, fine. V'chein, second category. Hamasaper betovas chavero bifnei sonaav, someone who speaks about a person's good in front of his enemies. We read that earlier also. Harizeh avak lashon hara, that's the dust of lashon hara. Shezeh gorem lahem she'saper b'gnusa, because this will cause the enemies to speak degradingly about him. V'alzeh inyan zeh, we read this again in the Pirush Mishnayos. Amar Shlomo Mevarak Re'ehu. No, we didn't read this one. Mevarak Re'ehu b'kol gadol b'boker hashkem klala techashev lo. Someone who blesses his fellow loudly in the early morning, it will be considered a curse for him. Shmitoch tovaso bali de ra'aso, because out of his good, people are going to come to his bad. Right. So that is also a case where the contents of your words are only good, but you are triggering. You're prompting, your speech is serving as a prompt for others to speak lashon hara. So you're causing lashon hara to be spoken about this guy. And again, that's why it's dafka in front of his enemies. If you're saying it in front of his friends, then saying good stuff is not going to make them speak badly about him, or at least you have no reason to assume that. Okay, now he divides the paragraph here, okay, but it still is a v'chein. V'chein hamasaber b'lashon hara derech schok v'derech kalas rosh. This one we did read. Someone who speaks lashon hara in a joking or frivolous manner. Kolomar, as if to say, as if to say that he's not speaking out of animosity. Hu Shlomo Omer. This is what Shlomo says. Just like someone who wearies himself by shooting firebrands and arrows in death. So too is a person who deceives his friend and says, "I was just joking." It's interesting to say he deceives his friend because rima. To my mind, is not synonymous with like degrading, like it's a specific form of lashon hara, but it's not like gnus, V'chein, and the fourth category, and this is the one that's most difficult to understand. Hamasaper b'lashon hara derech ramayus, someone who speaks lashon hara in a manner of, lying or duplicity. V'hu, namely. Shiyasaper letumo, he speaks innocently, as if he doesn't know that this thing is lashon hara. But when they call him out on it, when they rebuke him for it, Omer, he says, I didn't know we were talking about Ploni. I didn't know that these were the actions of so-and-so. Or I didn't know that this is lashon hara. And this is the reason why I have a hard time understanding this one, is because why is this not just actual lashon hara? Like if you are, let's say you pretend to not know that you're talking about so-and-so, or you pretend to not know that this is lashon hara, but it is lashon hara. So why is this not just like lashon hara? At the very least, like, yeah, it's lashon hara. Like it's even worse than lashon hara because you're pretending that it's innocent, So that's what I'm not sure about. Okay, yeah.
So you first can you scroll like to start? Like what's it? As one of the v'chein, like some other things you might thought weren't.
Well, are you asking about? I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay. I guess first is that maybe you first time you search lashon hara, it's something you get mocked. That's punishable. The wrong possible is you can get mocked for it, right?
No, no, you can't. It says rechilas, you can't get malchus, even though you don't get malchus on it because it's lav shanim b'maisa, and so same thing lashon hara is included in that lav. Yeah,
that's not right. So there's really still have a hobby in my head that in order to be part of the law, there has to be something where you can tell if a person's doing it.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Okay, so it is true that. So first of all, that does explain why he has two paragraphs here, because the first paragraph is the two examples where the statement itself is not lashon hara, but the context, the statement itself does not contain lashon hara, but it's indirect lashon hara. But then this one, this next paragraph is dependent on the intention, right? That if you just quoted the guy, the maisa is lashon hara, but in the first case, the motive is not, and in the second case, then he is claiming, that he didn't know that this was lashon hara. Right. That's interesting. Yeah. All right. Let's quickly look at the. I have not read the Yad Peshutah on this yet. So Avak Lashon hara ketzad. That's a tosefta in Avodah Zarah, Aleph Yud Daled. Avak Lashon hara lo yisa adam v'yitin betovas chavero mipnei avak lashon hara. A person should not. It's fine. Yisa v'yitain. Usually you translate it as like masa umatan, like discuss. I've just never seen it in this phrase. Yisa adam v'yitain b'tovas chavero. Shouldn't discuss his friend's good because of avak lashon hara. Yeah.
No, it's not really more serious. Like they also include things which you don't even have an intent of lashon hara for, but if you thought about it enough, you realize could be a problem.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Well, when you say if you thought about it hard enough, it could be a problem. I mean, it still has to be a likelihood, or it's not like some far-fetched case. Yeah.
Like I said, the example is clear by saying it was describing someone that's not traditional.
Right.
In my head, it's just not like that's just a quality about them. It's not a good or bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
The person say, "Don't say lashon hara."
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, these are the areas where where it's difficult to draw the line, right? I mean, I think a lot depends on the context in which you're saying it, right? And like what they are and aren't going to assume, how are they going to take your words, who you are, what was said before, what was said after, who the person is, like if you say like this, just to use an exaggerated example, if you're talking about someone as a thinker and you say that they're not traditional, that would just mean that they like think outside of the box. But if you're talking about someone's like religious affiliation, you say not traditional, that has different implications.
As the other thing, sort of religious always say not traditional, you mean like violate halacha, but as the more than who says not interested in do think exactly as they've been done. What I think the example will be
like progressive or something.
Yeah, specifically what I was thinking about, like, but it was like, I suppose this person doesn't do that, but they'd be like say that the type to be very, which I'm fine with say having Sfardi Vatsa.
Right.
It's like they'd be not totally into that whole thing with this, and they'd be fine with like having the as Ashkenazi having various bugs with Ashkenazi and hadn't didn't exist in Europe.
Yeah. So I guess I think this would be dependent on the context. Yeah. All right. So he goes on. He says Yisav Yitin Mashmal Dusiach. That is definitely a modern Hebrew word. Dialogue. I think Dusiach is probably a dialogue, right? Dialogue. Let's see. Google. Oops. Google Translate. Yeah, blam, dialogue. Okay. See, why can't we just use old Hebrew words? Okay, anyway. When one person speaks lashon hara, it is usher for the second person to accept it. Parsha Tes afilu lishmo v'lishtog aser. So it's, I don't know what this Mishnah's Rabbi Eliezer is. It says that even to listen and to be silent is aser. Shneimar v'higarti lo kishofet ani as beso leolam. Mi'idach kasher adam mesaper b'tovas chavero v'hashmei menase lahashtiko. So on the other hand, when a person speaks, says something good about his fellow, and the listener menase lahashtiko. What does that mean? Menase lahashtiko. Does menase have a different meaning in modern Hebrew? Because usually it's to test. I mean, in Manasseh attempts, attempts to silence him. Okay. So then that's going to allude to lashon hara, which is not explicit. Okay, so he's giving you like a catch-22, right? Like if I start to speak something that sounds like it's going to go in the lashon hara direction, and you listen to me and I say it, then that's usher for you because you're listening to lashon hara. But if you stop me, so then so I guess then that is still making my statement. It's not really catch-22. Now my statement is alluding to lashon hara, so it's Avak Lashon. Yeah.
So why would it be us to listen to the person praising? As I understand the praise means that causes the person.
Right. I guess it's not going to be us to listen to the praise, but for me to say it in front of someone who is. Well, is the case here where you're in front of an enemy? Let's see. Okay, there's another modern Hebrew word I don't know. Mistayeg, you know what that is? To disagree. Let's see if that fits. The Rambam. So, in order to explain this concept of dialoguing, the Rambam presents two examples of statements. Hamistayeg mimash amar harishon, which disagree with what the first person says. Ela shehi amira stuma, but they're like non-explicit statements. Zem makbil lemavur b'pirsha mishnayos avos and niskalel hu harimus b'mumei adam miblila amram b'ferish. That corresponds to what the Rambam wrote earlier in the Pirsha Mishnayos, that you're alluding to people's blemishes without saying them explicitly. I don't know what that whole back and forth was. He's trying to say how the Rambam gets these two from the statement in the Tosefta. So I guess, I mean, it's good to know that the Tosefta just says a person who discusses something good about his friend, it's also because of Avak Lashon, and the Rambam is extrapolating from that to his two cases here. But I'm not quite sure I follow how he's getting that. Okay. let's stop here for today. And I think I would like to come back to this next week and just to make sure we understand all the cases, especially the last one. So I'm going to have to read through this ahead of time just to see what Derech Ramayos is.
I do believe there are also Gemaras on that.
Yeah, in Erechin, it looks like the majority of the Gemaras in Erechin, and then some Yerushalmis. Yeah. Okay, stop here. And